again, everybody. I'm Rusty, aka William Robinson, aka Dr. Robinson, and I am the Blues Doctor. And this is my podcast, The Blues Doctor Recommends, and we're glad you're here. As the Blues Doctor, I focus on the messy questions, the uncomfortable questions that most pundits and analysts and podcasters don't want to address because it doesn't fit their bias. As the Blues Doctor, I take a different approach. I want to tackle those uncomfortable questions by taking a look at as much factual, objective information as I can before I make a decision about them. I came from a working class family, managed to make it through college and medical school, and in the 40 years after that, I've had a career as a physician, researcher, administrator, academician, teacher, and I think I have therefore a unique perspective on the US healthcare system at a number of different levels. And I don't neatly fit into either a left or right wing perspective, so you may be surprised at some of the conclusions that I come to. So make sure to like, subscribe, share, make comments. Tell us where you are and when you're listening to this podcast. All of those things help with that funny algorithm thing. And with that, let's get started. Have you ever wondered why healthcare in the US is so dysfunctional? Well, I do that almost every day and have done so for years. So I decided to frame that question so that it could be covered in a podcast type format. The resulting question became, who killed healthcare in the US? Well, I quickly realized that was too big a question to cover in any single podcast, and we've broken that down into several different questions, including how did we get here, about the historical process that brought us to this point, or what is the difference between health insurance and health care, to try to clear up some of the confusion about this topic. This week, we are continuing that series, and we have a new question, which is, do we need health insurance in the US at all? Or another way to phrase that might be, is there a viable alternative to traditional healthcare insurance in the US? We've discussed a number of the problems with healthcare in America and determined that the existing system is miserably broken. And thus far, no one has been able to fix it. So what if the system is truly unfixable? I've wondered if that's the case for a while now because it's built on a supply and demand system with a profit motive. Now, as I've said many times, I am a capitalist, and I fully believe the capitalist system has been of enormous benefit to mankind. The rise of the capitalist system in Western civilization over the past 300 years or so is in direct proportion to the rise in worldwide prosperity we've seen during that time. Want an example? Extreme poverty is defined at the international level as living on less than $2 per day American. That corresponds to no clean water, chronic food shortages, and famine, poor sanitation, epidemic disease, among other things. Extreme poverty fitting this definition has always existed, but the percent of the world's population living in extreme poverty has fallen dramatically since the rise of modern capitalism, particularly since about 1800, from over 80% of the world's population in poverty to about 10% today. That's amazing. It almost seems miraculous. And yet it's true. The creation of wealth that has occurred in human society as a result of capitalism lifted most of the world out of the misery of extreme poverty. But consumer based capitalism doesn't work as well in our modern healthcare system. Think of it this way. You go to the grocery store, and my wife likes to make fun of me because I go to the grocery store a lot, and I just like to look at all of the stuff in there. So she kind of needles me about that. But anyway, you go to the grocery store with a general idea of what you want. Then you look at the available products, you look at the label to see what's in it, and then you look at the price. You pick up the ones you want, you take them to the checkout area. The clerk totals them up and tells you what the cost is. You then pull out your credit card, which, face it, very few of us carry cash anymore, and you use the card, and the clerk hands you a detailed receipt Now compare that to the US healthcare system. You may have a general idea of what you want when you access the system, but then you're told by the system itself what you really need. And that may be very different from what you thought you needed when you went in. Then you attempt to purchase the various products that you've been told to purchase, and you realize there are no price tags on anything. Worse still, if you ask about the cost of a specific thing, you can't find anybody who really knows what the prices are. But you think, well, I must really need all this stuff since they told me I do, so you agree to pay. If you have insurance, you whip out your insurance ID card and hand it to the checkout clerk, who tells you thanks, you'll get a bill in 1 to 3 months. Just like a credit card, right? And you know those co-pays that most places charge you just for being there? That's the equivalent of a minimally required payment for your credit card just for using the system. So your insurance ID card works very similarly to a credit card in most of the economy. So the healthcare consumer buys a number of things for which you don't know the price and for which you weren't really involved in the decision-making process. In a functional supply-demand, consumer-based system, people make choices about what they want to buy. When gasoline prices go up, the number of Americans traveling by car drops, or more people will carpool or take a bus or whatever. Then when prices go down, as they inevitably will in a supply-demand system, people start traveling again by car. But that doesn't happen in the healthcare system because you as the consumer can't possibly know all you need to know to make an educated decision. Think about this. The supply-demand system is based on information. The more information you have, the more leverage or power you have over whoever you are buying or selling from. Doctors go to school for years to decades to acquire the knowledge needed to make healthcare decisions. You as the consumer simply don't have that knowledge and never will. Not even with the internet, but that's another topic. Maybe we'll do that another day. Maybe medicine and the internet. What's good and what's bad? What do you think? That'd probably be pretty good. And when the seller, in this case the healthcare system, has much more knowledge of the product than the buyer, that is the patient, they have a big advantage and they'll get the better end of the deal almost all the time. Another reason that standard capitalism doesn't work is in its determination of pricing. Every facility makes its own decision about pricing based on its contractual relationship with insurance companies, who are their real customers after all, as opposed to us, the patients. Here's an example from my own hometown from just a few years ago. I ordered an MRI for a patient of mine, and we set it up to be done in my primary facility, as I usually would. And this patient did not have insurance and was paying cash. Well, she was due to come back to see me in a few days with the results of the MRI. The day she was coming back, I looked in our electronic record system and saw that she didn't actually get the MRI done. But she showed up that day and handed me a file with the results of an MRI that she had gotten done at another facility that was literally right down the street, maybe a quarter mile away from where we were. I asked her why, and she told me that my facility had quoted her a charge of nearly $3,000 for the MRI. So she called the facility down the street and they quoted her a charge of $500. And it was exactly the same as what I had ordered at my facility. This patient was actually pretty sharp and started asking questions. She made it all the way up to the local CEO and asked why an MRI cost $3,000 here and down the street cost $500. He answered her with an indecipherable word salad that said almost nothing. She then asked if he would discount the price of the MRI for her based on this information. His answer, I'm not allowed to. Our corporate structure in another city decides on those things. And that's typical. There is no standard charge for almost any commodity in healthcare, and the charges may vary dramatically between facilities. So, consumer-based, supply and demand-driven capitalism is dysfunctional when the product is healthcare for several reasons. First, the consumer, the patient, has much less knowledge than the provider and therefore is always at a disadvantage in negotiations. Two, the prices are not available to the public, even though they are supposed to be by law, but that's another topic altogether also. They're not even available to most of the system representatives. Three, charges have little or no relationship to value because they vary so widely. And four, and we didn't talk about this today, but we did previously, and that's the moral consideration. As we mentioned last week, healthcare is somewhere between being a true commodity and a right. There will always be people who are sick or injured and can't pay. And we as a society have generally accepted at least some measure of responsibility for providing healthcare to those people. You put all of those things together and you start to realize why standard capitalism doesn't work very well for modern healthcare. Then the question becomes, why not change our current system? That would seem like the obvious and appropriate thing to do from both a financial and moral perspective. We've tried to fundamentally change the system several times over the years, but it hadn't really worked for the most part. The most recent attempt that most of us remember was Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, which by most analysts, both conservative and liberal, has been much less successful than it was hoped to have been. And we're going to talk about Obamacare in more detail in a subsequent podcast. But for now, suffice it to say that Obamacare has not allowed most of its patients to, quote, keep their doctor, nor has it lowered prices. Today, if you speak with some of the architects and supporters of Obamacare, and I have, they will admit that while they hoped it might work as touted, they really didn't believe that it would. The underlying and unspoken reason that Obamacare was pushed so hard by so many on the left side of the aisle was that they believed that it would push America one step closer to universal health care, as in Medicare for all. And that was and is their ultimate goal. So if Obamacare didn't really change things significantly, is there anything else that can? We still don't know the answer to that, or at least I don't. But I think we can conclude what the answer is not. And that is a modification of the existing system will not work. We can tinker around the edges all we want and make some progress in limited areas, but it's really the system as a whole that's broken. It's going to take a complete overhaul of the system from top to bottom to produce something that eliminates all of these problems that we've been talking about. Here's an analogy I like. Horse-drawn vehicles provided most of the transportation in the U.S. until the 1920s or so. There was no amount of tinkering that could be done to that system to make it work effectively in the modern era where rapid and reliable travel is required for the nation as a whole to be effective. You could breed a new strain of horses that would be faster or that would require less food and water, and it would have no significant impact on travel as a whole. It took a completely new system in the form of the internal combustion engine to fill the need for dependable, affordable transportation in a country as large as the U.S. But it wasn't just the internal combustion engine that made modern transportation possible. There had to be a network of paved roads to go along with that. Then there had to be a nationwide system of providing fuel for all of those vehicles on all of those roads scattered out across the country. And the current U.S. healthcare system is like that, but even more so. It affects even more parts of the economy than did horse and buggy transportation. And that's the core of the problem. The U.S. healthcare system takes up about 20% of the total GDP. A total disruption of 20% of the U.S. economy would cause an economic catastrophe worse than the Great Depression. Let that sink in. Do we risk another economic collapse to fix U.S. healthcare? That's a very hard call to make. On the other hand, we know on some level that this hyperinflated system is totally broken and must be fixed, or it threatens economic collapse all by itself. The bottom line, we know something must be done, but we risk economic meltdown if we try any of the solutions that seem to be available to us currently. So to answer our question, is there an alternative to the U.S. healthcare system currently? The short answer is no. The longer answer is that it's got to be a complete overhaul from top to bottom. We've gotten positive feedback on this series so far, so we're going to continue it. There's plenty left to talk about it, believe me. Next week, we're going to consider the role of physicians and nurses in the U.S. healthcare problem. And our question will be, how much money should American doctors and nurses make? And that's liable to ruffle some feathers, I would guess. Ash Wednesday was 3 days ago as we're recording this, so we are in the season of Lent now. We haven't been to any new clubs this week, so here's a compilation of some old favorites of mine from the New Orleans and Gulf Coast music scene. And that's about all we have this week. We've got some new subscribers to the channel this week, thanks to Gutters Pub, and that's GUTTERSPUB, and Murray Evans 9871. And I would invite both of you to actively participate with us as we continue this series. Anyway, as I usually say at this point, please watch next week's podcast. Okay? See you later.